Alright guys, hey, what's up? Andaull here today. So to add a little context to this video before we get into it, I'm doing a dual commentary with CZsWorld. If you guys want to check out his channel, it'll be down in the description below. Go subscribe to him. He is a really good video maker. So yeah, be sure to go subscribe to him. And with that said, today we are going to be reading 2 Let's Not Meet stories. This is kind of something new I want to add to my channel. I'm not changing my channel. I'm just adding something onto it. See if you guys like it. So if you guys do like it, be sure to drop a like, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment in the comment section down below telling me whether you guys like this or don't like this. This is from the Reddit Let's Not Meet. That link will be down in the description below. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and let CZ take over this. His story is the first one, mine's the second. So yeah, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Snapchat and all that stuff. And I hope you guys enjoy this.
A few years ago, my brother-in-law bought another apartment complex in Florida. He owns a few apartment complexes in West Palm Beach and Miami, so when he told me he bought another one, he wanted me to go and manage it. I figured, why the hell not? I had just graduated college with a degree and planned to go and get my master's, so I figured I could manage his place and do graduate school. When he booked my flight to Orlando, I was stoked. I love Disney, and I dreamed of buying a year pass and checking out all the neat parks. Then, when I got out there, we drove out of Orlando, and I had a bad feeling. He bought the apartments in a town called Leesburg. It's only an hour or so from Orlando. If I had to describe it, I'd say it's like a biker town mixed with a retirement community. I was a little disappointed that I was an hour from Orlando with all of its nightlife and clubs and whatnot. I made it work though, and soon settled into my new life, managing a small apartment complex. I had my own one-bedroom apartment in the corner, and then there were 10 other tenants. Most were older folks, snowbirds, and retirees that spent their days golfing and swimming in the pool we had. There were 2 military families, one with small kids. Then there was Andy. Andy was an enormous man. Like, I'm a pretty big guy, 6'4", 250 pounds, but he was at least 6'6" and 400 plus pounds. He walked with a cane and had long black hair that he put in a ponytail. He worked from home, or so he said, but the rumor was he was on disability after a horrible work accident. I really didn't care. He paid his rent on time, he was quiet and mostly kept to himself. I was only in his place once, when his AC cut out, and to my surprise, he was pretty neat. No food containers or pizza boxes or beer cans laying out. Things in our complex went pretty good for the next year, until one night in November. It was raining, like it always does in Florida, and it was around midnight when someone rang my doorbell. I looked out and saw one of the tenants, Joseph. Joe was one of my retirees who retired to Florida to, in his words, play golf and drink beer. Normally he was all smiles and jokes, but that night his face was pale and he looked frightened. I hate to bother you, Sam, but something ain't right with Andy. I put my jacket on and followed him out to his apartment since Andy was his neighbor. He put his finger to his lip and motioned for me to listen. I put my ear up to the door and heard Andy fighting with someone. It sounded like whoever he was fighting with was throwing things. I was taken aback because, as far as I know, he had never had a guest over there for the year that he lived there. I knocked and heard him stomp over to the door and open it. He looked off. Normally, the guy was very well dressed and put together, and like I said, he wasn't a messy guy. But he answered the door in a shirt that had grease stains, and his hair was limp and greasy. He smelt of body odor. I peered in behind him and saw his place was a disaster. I asked if everything was okay, which just irritated him. He told me everything was fine and shut the door in my face. I sent Joe back to his place and told him to let me know if he heard anything else before going back to bed. The next morning, I decided to pay Andy a visit to see if he was okay. I went to his place and knocked. No answer. So I decided I'd try again later. I got busy doing other things and pretty much forgot about it. December rolls around and I'm starting to get the monthly rent checks. Nothing from Andy, and that got me a bit worried because he was always on time with his checks. So I head back over there and knock on his door. Nothing. I knocked again and heard grunting and moaning. Now, I probably should have called the police first, but I didn't. I opened the door with my key ring and it was hit with the foulest smell ever. It smelled like piss, shit, vomit, and body odor, all rolled into one nasty smell. The walls were streaked with what I assume was shit, and the place was trashed. I start calling for Andy while dialing 911, and I hear moaning from the back bedroom. I can never unsee what I saw. Even to this day, I get flashbacks. Andy was naked and laying on the floor of his room on some dirty clothes. He was covered in his own shit and piss, and there were piles of vomit on the carpet. That was bad, but the clincher was he was covered in bites. Human bites. All over his arms and legs, and they were starting to smell with infection. He was also bleeding from his rectum. I wondered who had attacked him. Was it the person we heard him fighting with? I didn't get any answers until a few days after he'd been rushed to the hospital, and he was fighting for his life in ICU. The doctors talked to his sister, who turned out to be his medical guardian, and things slowly came into place. Turns out, Andy did that to himself. He suffered from multiple mental disorders. He had stopped taking his meds earlier that month in November, and that night that we heard him arguing, there was nobody else there. He was arguing with himself. That means those bites on his arms and legs were also inflicted by himself. The bleeding in his rectum came from him inserting a foreign object and doing so much damage that it ruptured his internal organs. He ended up pulling through and went home to live with his sister. I had the task of cleaning up his apartment, and what I found while cleaning freaks me out as much as finding Andy himself. He had a shoebox full of cutouts from magazines, old family photos, and even photos he obviously took of the residents of the apartments, including myself. All of the eyes were burnt out with cigarettes, and some of them had X's put over the mouths. I'm not sure if this was part of his mental decline or if he was always that creepy, and I never noticed it. All I know is, Andy, let's not meet again.
I lived in Menifee, California for about over 3 years. During that time, I went to the local high school, and let me just say that a lot of crazy stuff went down while I attended. One time, a library employee showed up to the school very early in the morning and shot herself in her car. The body was discovered during second period. What creeps me out most of all was that I passed by her car while walking to school that morning and didn't even notice it. Another time, an undercover cop posing as a student was able to identify kids that were selling narcotics, and a huge drug bust ensued shortly after. Strangely enough, on that same day that happened, while I was walking to school, some guy I knew asked if I wanted to buy pot off of him, which I wisely declined. Later on, I saw that same guy get arrested and escorted out of my classroom. The event itself closely mirrored the film 21 Jump Street. Pretty awesome. However, the one event that was probably the biggest and shook the entire community was the disappearance and death of a local boy named Terry Dwayne Smith Jr. The tragedy happened during the summer after the 2013 school year. I didn't know who the boy was, but I did know his older brother, Skylar. I knew Skylar from school. He was in my first period English class at the time. I didn't talk much to him even though he sat near me, but on the times that I did say a word to him, he was friendly. He came off as a little odd, but I personally didn't think he was really that strange. He had his own group of friends that were all easy to get along with. Something to note that did happen early on in the school year was a confrontation he got in with another student. I remember hearing about how this one guy said something offensive to Skylar, which greatly angered him and erupted into a fist fight. The kid's front tooth got knocked out. At the time, it seemed funny to everyone else, but it was an indicator of how far he'd be willing to go when it came to getting agitated. Anyways, on to the main story. After school ended that year, I spent most of the summer just hanging out with my trio of friends. One day I was in my room doing nothing of interest, so I decided to go on Facebook. While on there, Skylar posted something that appeared on my newsfeed. He said his little brother had gone missing and was urging his friends to be on the lookout for his whereabouts. I found it pretty unfortunate, but thought the kid probably would be found the same day. Either the same day or the next, I forgot which, I happened to be watching the news and the #1 topic was the disappearance of a boy named Terry A. Picture of him was then put up. On closer examination, I noticed he was the same boy that Skylar had posted about earlier. Apparently, the situation had gotten dire, and the brother's mother, Shauna, had called for a group effort to go and search for the boy. As the days went on, more and more people went out in search of young Terry. I believe Skylar made a few more posts about it, but I could be wrong. Eventually, he was made a suspect and was taken into custody by the police because he was the last person to see Terry alive before he went missing. I remember hearing about how a lot of his friends were in denial and disbelief. To them, he could never do such a thing. Since I personally didn't know Skylar that well, I couldn't really pass judgment at the time. While in custody, Skylar changed his story several times about his last encounter with his brother. His main one being that they were home alone and he decided to leave and go hang out with his friends, and that supposedly Terry followed him for a while until Skylar told him he couldn't tag along and ordered him to return home. This set up his theory that Terry was probably abducted by someone that night. Finally, after several days of searching, Terry's body was eventually discovered behind the family home under a tree in a shallow grave. The general consensus at the time was that Skylar did kill him for unknown reasons and tried to bury him. Some even thought that the mother was in on it because she too was still in defense of Skylar, who was then charged with the crime. Shauna acted pretty strangely, such as saying Terry had autism and that supposedly at first she didn't let the cops investigate her property. After the corpse was discovered, the huge search party was promptly called off and a candle-lit vigil was held for Terry. In the aftermath, a lot of drama ensued. Terry's father came into town from the other side of the country and claimed that his ex-wife had lied about their son having autism and demanded to take his body back with him to be buried in his local area. He even sued Shauna for a large amount of money. I think it was for child negligence or for emotional distress. The two even appeared and debated on the Dr. Phil show, but nothing came of that, besides that everyone already knew. Since at the time Skylar was a minor, he wasn't charged as an adult. He was found guilty of manslaughter but was offered a plea deal, the details of which have not been released to the public. Apparently what actually happened was that the brothers were roughhousing when Terry accidentally got killed. Their mother later suggested something like the boy hitting his head on the corner of a table or something. In a panic, Skylar tried to bury him in the backyard. What was strange was that knowing what had happened, Skylar still went to Facebook and asked for help in searching for his brother, instead of just confessing. Skylar was sentenced to 12 years and will stay in juvenile detention until he's 23. The links to the case will be listed below. Overall, this was pretty tragic, and it's crazy. One day I was talking to someone in class and the next he's on the news for his own brother's murder. Skylar, let's not ever meet again. Alright guys, so I hope you guys have enjoyed that video. If you guys have, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave a like, it greatly helps me out. Be sure to leave a comment and tell me that you guys do like this or don't like this. Be sure to follow me on Twitter. Be sure to follow me on Instagram. That's the best way to get a hold of me, and also on Snapchat. All those are down in the description below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace